Tim, did you get a chance to download the video that we talked about last week? Or shall I just...
I tried to, but I had an issue. So are you able to play that?
Yeah, that should be fine. I've linked it from my PowerPoint, so yeah, it should be okay.
Let me just...
If it doesn't work, there's a link to it on the document that you sent round, so everyone can access it in their own time. But it's only like it's very, very short. So if I can play it, that would be good.
Yeah, that's fine.
And are you okay to monitor people's hands up and chat and that kind of thing, Tim?
Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'll do a quick introduction and then explain how everything is going to be, and then I'll do the introductions with everybody and get everyone to quickly say who they are, and then we'll basically hand it over to yourself.
Great. Do you want me to stop? Are you okay for me to share my screen now, or do you want me to leave it?
If you can stop that for a moment,
and
then
I was
we'll
just
go back when I introduce you.
That's fine.
Is that okay? Yeah.
That is fine.
It'll be easier for me to manage all of actually see everybody in the room.
Sure.
So I am expecting a couple more people, but hopefully they will sort of pop in when we are progressing. So, right, welcome everybody. I am Tim Calvert. Before we start, I just wanted to check everyone's okay with it being recorded. So we're recording it because there's a few people who can't attend today who want to actually have a look at it afterwards. So welcome to the second of our special Audio Description Association Zoom sessions. This session will centre on inclusive description for quality and access, which is IDEA. And we're honoured to be joined today by Professor Hannah Thompson from Royal Holloway University in London, who ran the project in association with Vocalise. We'll begin with introductions, so I'm going to go around and say your name, and if you can just say a little about yourself, where you're from, and what relationship you have with audio description. If you can keep it to 30 seconds max, that would be great. Also, there are some visual impaired participants here today, so if you can give a very brief description of your appearance. And after introductions, for the first part, Hannah will begin a presentation around the Describing Diversity project and the results of that and take questions. Then in the second part, she'll discuss how these findings resulted in IDEA, which is inclusive description for equality and access, and talk more about the outcomes of that project and take questions along the way and at the end. So without further ado, we'll kick off the introductions. So my name is Tim Calvert. I'm Vice Chair of the Audio Description Association, and I lead communications and PR for ADA as well. I'm a consultant in access and inclusion and audio description to the arts and culture sector. I also run a project in association with RNIB Connect Radio and online called View on Access that showcases what venues are offering in relation to access and audio description. I'm currently in Crawley. I'm a white male, stocky build, with white short blonde hair and glasses, and wearing a grey jumper. And we will go over now to Di. We'll kick off with Di for introductions.
Hello, hello. I'm Di Langford. I'm in the UK. I've got grey hair, glasses, and a purple sweater, and I've been an audio describer for over 25 years, and I work mainly with Vocalise in the UK.
We'll go over to Dan Parr now from Hear the Picture.
Hello, I'm Dan Parr. I'm an audio describer for a new actor-led company called Hear the Picture, and we're experimenting with having audio description delivered in character. I'm a young white male, early 30s, with brown hair, black beanie hat on, and a white and black t-shirt.
Many thanks for that. Over to Anne next.
Hi everyone, I'm Anne Hornsby. I'm director of Mind's Eye, been describing since the late 1980s. I've got messy shoulder length grey hair. I'm white, 50s, late 50s, and I'm against a background of a small lake. Thank you.
Many thanks. Jo next.
Hello, my name is Jo. I am in the UK, in the Wirral. I am a woman in her mid-40s. I'm white with dark hair, glasses and a grey polo neck. I'm also part of Hear the Picture with Dan, and he's explained what that is. And we're also actors. So that's me.
We'll have a quick introduction from Hannah, even though we're going to hear from you in a moment.
Well, you've kind of told everyone all about me, and I know a lot of people are in the room, but I'm partially blind, a woman in my late 40s. I've got big, thick purple glasses, and I'm speaking to you from my front room in Oxford.
Excellent. Ruth next. Hello, Ruth.
Hello, I'm Ruth James, and I've got short white hair. I'm a white woman, and in my spare room, basically. So I've got Hawker's Eyes Wave behind me, and I've been describing for, I think, 10 years, possibly 12. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm wearing blue.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ros next. And you're mute.
And I'm muted. My name's Ros Chalmers. I'm a white woman in my 60s with shoulder-length silver hair. I'm wearing glasses. My pronouns are she, her. And I've been an audio describer since the 1990s, and I work mainly in London in the UK, and I'm freelance.
Thank you. Jane next. Say hello to Jane. We can't hear you, Jane. Do you want to try going out and back in, Jane, and see if that fixes it? We'll go over to Jonathan while we're waiting for Jane.
Hi there, I'm Jonathan. I run a company called Sightlines. Been audio describing for nearly 30 years. White male in my late 50s, wearing blue knitwear, and I have short cropped hair and wireframe glasses.
Excellent, thank you, Jonathan. Olga next. Go over to Olga. Hello, Olga.
Hello, my name is Olga Davis. I have pale complexion and shoulder length brown hair. I'm currently in UK in Liverpool, and I'm freelance so-called audio-visual translator, which means basically subtitling, including subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing. And I'm just making my first steps in audio description as well. I have done a few voluntary descriptions of figure skating and short films. And I'm currently preparing a PhD project proposal in audio description research. So I suppose my experience is in films rather than like I can see here, I can hear that here people are mostly have theatrical background, but I believe there is a lot to be learned from each other, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. We'll go over to Paula next. It's great to see you, Paula.
Hi Tim, hi, it's Paula Succi. I'm in Milton Keynes. I'm visually impaired, and I'm in my sitting room, and my 60th birthday cards are behind me, so you might be able to see those.
Amazing. Happy birthday.
And it's very windy here. I expect it is where you are as well. Lots of bangs and bumps outside. I keep going, oh, what was that?
Yeah. Many thanks, Paula. Alice next. Hello, Alice.
Hi everyone, my name's Alice and I'm in Bradford, and I'm an audio describer mainly for opera and theatre around the north of England, and I'm also a voiceover artist, and I've done some audio description for films as well. And I'm a white woman in my 50s with curly greying hair in a bob, and I've got some strange instruments on the wall behind me, not all of which I can play.
Brilliant, thank you. Mo next. Hello, Mo. You there, Mo?
I am. I was just unmuting. Hi, I'm the co-vice chair with Tim of the Audio Description Association, and I'm an audio describer mainly of live performance with Derby audio describers. Though recently I've done more dance videos and as audio mo. I am a woman in my 50s with pronouns she, her. I'm of East Asian appearance with very long silvering hair and very dark black spectacles. And I'm in a green jumper, and that's me.
Excellent, thank you, Mo. Claire next. Welcome to Claire.
Hello, my name's Clara May. I'm in northern France at the moment, and I'm wearing a blue polo neck jumper because it's very cold here. I've just quite recently turned 60. I've got messy dark blonde greying hair with a fringe, which is currently scraped back into a rather messy ponytail, and I'm wearing small wireframe glasses.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Elaine. Hello to Elaine.
You can hear me. I'm a film and TV audio describer at ITV, which is where I'm currently sitting in London. I'm also a freelance audio describer, so I do a lot of queer cabaret and also like live dance shows. I'm a Black woman in my 30s.
Excellent, thank you. Edward next. Welcome to you, Edward.
Hello. Sorry, had my mouth full. I was having a spot of lunch whilst everybody else was introducing. I'm Edward. I haven't yet reached the age of 60. I'm in Amersham, Buckinghamshire, and I'm visually impaired. I particularly enjoy theatre, as in plays, rather than musicals or opera. And I listen to radio rather than watch television at the moment, but it's for lack of a great experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Edward. Emily next. I think, are you on mute, Emily? Yeah. We'll go over to Jane and try Jane again. Not working, Jane? No, I think we've lost Jane. So Megan, we'll go over to Megan now.
Hey everyone, I am Megan. I am a white woman in my early 40s with long gray hair. I am in the US, where I'm an audio describer of many things. Tim, I'm going to send you a link to Last Stop on Market Street, which I just did a virtual performance, and Barber of Seville, in case anybody wants to check those out, both made for kids. But if you have kids or you're interested, I'll send those over to you. And I'm preparing to describe the Paralympics for the US and Canada. So that's all.
Excellent, amazing. And Yulia, I think it is. Hello, Yulia. Are you there? Apologies if I pronounced it wrong. Yulia? No? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Hello? You going to say hello? No.
Yulia, we heard you. You did unmute for a moment. We heard your hello.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
It is working. Would you like to describe yourself, Yulia? Oh, I think we're having
There's a few issues
on
there,
and off,
so we'll
on
move on. Yeah, we'll move on. So we'll go over to Hannah now and start it all off. So welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah.
Right. So thanks very much for inviting me. A lot of people here have actually already know about the project, or have actually been actively involved in the project that I'm going to talk about. So obviously anyone is free to chip in with any thoughts, comments, observations. Okay, so basically, as Tim said, I'm going to do two things today. I'm going to quickly remind you or tell you about the Describing Diversity project, which was the kind of research arm of the IDEA project. So it was, and then specifically, I'm going to focus on some of the key recommendations that came out of the project for describers. There were also some recommendations for theatres and for the kind of cultural sector more generally. And then in the second part, I'll talk about what we did in the project and how we worked with theatres to try and implement some of the recommendations for theatres and how that went. And then, you know, maybe talk about what we could do next and kind of the future. Okay, so just a quick recap then. So the Describing Diversity project ran in 2019 and 20, and it was really mostly about audio introductions. So it was about, well, we did a review of audio introductions, we did a survey, we did some interviews, we did some collaborative workshop with quite a few of you guys, especially describers who work with Vocalize. And we wrote a report and out of that came some recommendations. And I sent links to the full report and the project website to Tim earlier.
Yeah, they've all been sent out to everybody.
They've been circulated brilliantly. So, but basically it left us with a good understanding of the situation around two things, how issues around how to describe diversity. So in other words, how to put physical characteristics such as disability, race, gender, age into words in a way which is equitable for listeners and also for people being described. And that's why it's actually quite interesting to talk about the Paralympics in that regard. And then how we can maybe work with theatres to make audio description a little bit more visible, more celebrated as kind of a creative product, as kind of the overall theatrical, or in fact indeed cinematic or televisual experience, rather than a kind of add-on. And that's really what we were trying to do in the project. So the IDEA project was a dissemination and engagement project that was funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and with project partners including Mind's Eye and Anne, and Vocalize, and we worked with 6 different theatres and produced and a range of productions, and it was one of 10 equality, diversity and inclusion projects that was running in the UK. So it was all about knowledge exchange and public engagement, to disseminate the findings of describing diversity and to kind of have practical find practical solutions and kind of experiment with different ways of doing audio description. And it gave us a bit of time and a bit of money to kind of spend a bit more time with theatres and be able to properly pay freelancers and creatives for putting their work into audio description. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about then is the recommendations that came out of the Describing Diversity report for describers. There are actually 12 recommendations, but some of them are kind of self-obvious and basically common sense, and I think they're not problematic, and they're not at all interesting or surprising. So the ones I've picked to talk about today are the ones that have led to kind of discussion amongst describers, and that's either been kind of individually in person with me or with Rachel, the project manager, or it's been during the MOOC. So there's a free online course, which some of you have done. I recognize some of your names from that. It's a 4-week kind of self-service accessible course all about creating audio description. And some of the people have been, notably Roz, have been involved in creating that. Or we've also got the Inclusive Description forum on Basecamp, which has got 224 members from all around the world. And if you want me to add you, I absolutely can. Just send me an email after this. And so people have been discussing these issues. So these are the kind of ones that have sparked the most interest and conversation among describers. So the issue of presuming or not presuming a default for a production. So when and how to establish that, and then how to explain what is different from the default, how to avoid judgments and microaggressions, whether and how to use privileged information about the actor or the character's ethnicity, disability, gender, or other identity, and how to get proper actor input into that. This question of whether, well, of naming whiteness, not just blackness. So in other words, and I would say the same goes for disability. So instead of saying, you know, there's a disabled character on stage, what about saying there are 6 non-disabled characters on stage? So it's about not just naming the thing which is different. Consider and acknowledge your own position. So yeah, the issues around positionality and subjectivity. We talked a lot in the project about how audio description is subjective, always subjective, because there's always more than one way of seeing anything. And so creative ways of getting away from the kind of objective, you know, the kind of neutral voice of God, if you like. And then related to that, ways of giving whether or not to give the audience kind of insights into how you've come to your decisions. So is it helpful to include a kind of preface, translator's preface, translator's strategy? I'm interested, I mean, I work in translation studies and French literature, and I'm interested in audio description having the same kind of status as translation. So in other words, the describer being acknowledged as a translator and as a producer of creative material. So anyway, those are the kind of issues that came out of describing diversity and the idea project that I thought you might like to ask about, talk about. I'd really welcome your opinions, your thoughts. Is it helpful for me to stop sharing my screen, Tim, so that you can see everyone, or can you see if anyone's?
I can, if it's easier for you to share screen, that's fine.
Okay.
I've got everybody. I've made it small,
okay,
so I've got everybody on there. Yeah, it's fine.
So maybe you could just like call people out, or either read out comments from the chat, or if you could ask people to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if anyone has got any questions regarding anything that Hannah has just spoken about.
So just to give you a bit of something to start with. So the MOOC, the inclusive accessible online course, is free. Anyone can do it, and it's running like all the time, but for some of it I was moderating. And the last point, the point about translation strategy, created quite a lot of discussion a couple of weeks ago, with some describers very strongly saying it was not their role. Like they didn't think the audience would be interested in why they made certain decisions, and other people saying, I like, you know, if I've made a decision, I like being able to justify it or explain it. So, for example, around the use of pronouns, or something like that. So anyway, I wondered if that would be a place to start.
Yeah, is there anyone with an opinion on that who would like to? You can either sort of put your hand up on screen, or actually physically put your hand up, or just speak. Because we're pretty quiet at the moment.
I think Ros has got her hand up.
Ros, would you like? Yeah.
I would really be interested from Hannah about the sort of material that's included when you do the transliteration work, and the sort of information that's included in that, as a translator's preface.
So, well, I would say it's about what kind of resources you've consulted. It would be one thing. So where you've got the information, and I think audio describers actually do that quite intuitively. When you say something like, the actor describes himself as blah, 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 or in the program, the director says blah, 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 that is kind of meta information, you know, so it's telling, it's giving people a sense. there's also kind of, you know, I'm describing this to you. I'm sitting, you know, in the middle of the auditorium, in the front row of the circle. So what you see there is really different from, let's say, someone who's sitting right at the left-hand side of the stalls. So there's like literal, like physical positionality. And then there's kind of like, I'm describing this to you as a middle-aged white woman who goes to the theatre twice a week. So I'm very, you know, I understand a lot of the kind of theatrical conventions, and so, you know, I'm going to include that. So it's, you know, or I'm a new describer, and this is my first show. Other things, I guess, would be, I think it would depend on the play or the project. But so, for example, if you're describing the Paralympics and you are yourself a Paralympian, so you have like a lived experience of something that you're describing, that could be a really interesting thing to mention. What do you think, Roz? Do you think it's kind of too much information and a bit like distracting for the audience, or do you think some people might appreciate to know about your approach?
I think getting information, where you get the information from, you know, in conversation with the designer, you know, we discovered that, or in the Printed program we find, and that kind of thing. And I had one quite recently where an actor described himself as light Moshe, or like Moshe, depending where you're coming from, which is something, but he put an exclamation mark after it. So I said the actor describes himself humorously as, because, you know, this whole thing about describing people as condiments and foodstuffs is something that I would never, as a white woman, use. But because that person actually used it, I felt that it needed to be put in context, that it was with the exclamation mark, there was a sort of a humorous intent to it.
Yeah, like a kind of knowing.
Knowing, that's right. So that kind of thing I would automatically include. Well, when it comes to my position, I mean, I would sincerely hope I would never be describing from the front row of the auditorium. But you know, I might be in a small space. I might be using a face mask and describing from the back row. I'm behind you. But that kind of thing, I think, is less useful than to an audience member, because basically they're going to be receiving information most of the time through headphones. So a lot of what happens in creative description, a lot of the things that happen on stage are very interesting to sighted people, but for the blind and partially blind people, basically the experience is the same to them. They're going to get that information through headsets. So there is, when we're talking about the picture work, to be able to say, yes, I'm talking from the point of view of Horatio, or something like that. If you're describing Hamlet, I think that is very, very important. It's something that I'm interested in. I'm interested in. I'd be interested in those people who use the service to find out what they would like to know that would be useful for them or interesting for them, because it's not always, description isn't always about what's useful. Sometimes it's about what's interesting and what starts a conversation.
Excellent. Can I also say, we'll go over to Alice in a minute, who's got a hand up for a question, but I'll also say, if there's anyone who wants to ask a question but they don't actually want to speak, if you want to put it into the chat, and then I'll ask that question for you. So we'll go over to Alice next, because you have a question.
Yeah, I just thought I'd comment. I thought it was extremely useful, Hannah, because I don't think I've ever been doing that, and I think it's really important to say, you know, I have had a chat with the director. I am basing this on talking to the actors themselves. Otherwise, it sounds like I'm describing them, and it might be that I have chatted to them. So yes, I think it's great, because then it just makes it clear that you're not making this up yourself. And if you haven't had much of a chance to chat to the director, then you can say, well, despite best efforts, whatever, this is very much based on me seeing the show twice and doing my best, sort of thing. So I think it's brilliant. I love it. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you.
Anne?
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce that really. I mean, it's kind of what we do in the visual arts, because what you don't want to do as a describer is sound like that voice of God. You're telling people what to think. So more that you can bring in, some of the visitors have reacted in this, or somebody has said this, or a group of school children in here said they thought it was this, then you're opening up the idea that there isn't just one way of looking at something and one way of reacting to something. So where time allows, and depending on what the artwork or the event is, it can be really useful. But I've found it really helpful to say something like, the actor playing Tinkerbell describes themselves as this. And again, it doesn't sound like I've decided that that's what they should be called. It's up to them to put that information over.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne. Edward.
I was just thinking about the amount of information the describer should reveal about themselves, and I think it's probably useful context to think of them as going to the theatre with the person who's receiving the description, and just saying, if you found yourself as a volunteer taking somebody to the theatre, what conversation, what would you say about yourself in introducing yourself? And that's all it needs. It doesn't need a long version of this is my perspective or something like that, but it's just good to know who you've gone to the theatre with, just enough to be able to relate to. And it doesn't need the life story. It doesn't need a CV of previous describing credentials. It might just be a simple thing, say, this is my favourite playwright, or this is something which describes you in relation to the shared experience that you're about to have with the describee. It's a bonding exercise, as you pointed out, but it doesn't need to be deeply involved or very specific. And in terms of how the people portrayed identify themselves, that if that's not transparent through their voices and their words, then obviously that does need some explicit description. If it's something which will be unexpected from the voice alone, I think probably is the best way of putting it.
Yeah. Great. So if we don't have any more questions, we'll go on to the next section.
Yeah, just to say, just to respond to Edward, I totally agree. As a user of description, I much prefer it when I know who the person is, because it's quite an intimate experience to have someone in your head describing, and I always feel a bit bereft at the end if I haven't, like, if it's just anonymous. And whenever I get a chance to speak to the describer afterwards, I absolutely always seize it, because it's like so much effort goes into live description, and it's like a creative endeavor that the person's doing, like a performance, as much of a performance as the actors. And I just think it's just really important to know that, and to kind of, I mean, I'd like us to get to a stage where everything's described, obviously, but that describers are kind of like known by people, so that I could say, right, well, I'm actually going to just go to productions done by X because I really like the way X does it, rather than me kind of turning up and not knowing in advance who it's going to be, and is it going to be one of my favorites, is it going to be someone I really like. So yeah, I agree with Edward that just a little bit of information, hi, I'm Susan, and whatever, it's just really nice.
If I can just mention, like, I get a lot of feedback from those who are visually impaired, actually speaking about what you have, saying that they're sometimes disappointed if they go to an audio described performance and they don't get to meet the describer, and they don't get to give feedback, or they don't they just go there and they're not there at the beginning. I know for quite a lot of vocalized performances, they tend to come out at the beginning and they tend to meet people, but there are some that have been mentioned to me where they say that they've heard a new describer but haven't ever been able to meet them or sort of speak about their experience or give feedback on how they found it. And I feel that I know there are some describers who are very personable, who make it a point of always meeting those who are going to be receiving their description. But I think there are some who don't do that, and I think that's always felt when that happens.
Can I just say, I do think that the touch tour is a very important part of that, getting to know the audience and actually being there in the auditorium when people gather, and introducing yourself and having just learning what they're expecting from it, because that's when you find that they didn't get the introductory notes or something like that. They didn't understand the introductory notes. So you then know how to pitch that touch tool in order to fill in the pieces that they've missed. So I do know that some describers, as some actors, feel that they've got to keep that distance and they've got to keep that that sort of sense of almost mystery between you. But I've always found actually meeting people for the touch tour and at the touch tour, because the way you work with the touch tour, they get to kind of know your personality and the sort of things they're likely to expect. It's not just it's not just a jolly, it is something where they get a much more rounded experience, I think, of what they're about to have.
Had Ruth, I think, had a comment as well.
Well, I was just going to say that I quite often feel shy about approaching people after a show in case they hated it. And I don't want, they've had a lovely time watching the show, and then I come up and go, so what did you think about me? And I don't want to do that. Because, it's an entertainment, not a please now analyse how the audio description went, is my theory. Quite happy to talk about the show, of course, but I don't want to imply that I now want praise or an analysis of how well I did.
That's it. That ties in with discussions we had during the project, actually, about, and there were some strong opinions in both camps about whether or not to acknowledge the audio describers on stage at the end of the play. You have to get people on stage and thank them and name them and applaud them. And I feel quite strongly that audio description should be applauded, not kind of applauding the individual describers, because obviously there are lots of people involved in the play who are backstage and don't get applauded. But one of the interesting things about audio description is that it's invisible. So most people in the auditorium don't know it's happening. And so don't appreciate the amount of work that goes into it, but also don't know about it, so can't tell anyone about it. So one of the things we did in the project was we really publicized it. We had leaflets, we had posters, we had announcements before the production. We had as Anne knows, we got the describers on stage at the end. And we also had question and answer sessions about the description after the performance with the audience, but not just the users, but everyone in the audience was invited, and the actors and the describers. And it was astonishing how interested non-blind people were in the description as a kind of translation. And it made them think about the play differently, because they said, well, how would I have put that into words for someone who couldn't see it? And so they were there was this extra level of engagement. And obviously question and answer sessions are not practical, and they're very, as we learned during the project, incredibly difficult to organize, and that there are all kinds of practical issues around actor time, describer time, the spaces in the theatres, but when we did them, they really worked. And when non-blind audiences were invited, and ideally we invited them in advance and also told them how to listen to the audio introduction in advance, a lot of people who don't identify as blind or partially blind said, my goodness, I would have listened to that. That sounds amazing. It would have helped me.
Edward has a question.
I was just a reinforcement comment to what Hannah said about the Orange Tree Theatre for 20 years or so had a policy which was that the audio describer took a curtain call, and the lead member of the cast would just call for hush during the curtain call and announce that this evening's performance has been audio described by, and gesticulate over to the describer, and they would take a full round of applause from the whole audience, and many of whom didn't know what audio description was, but part of the experience and feedback. And actually, even though not everybody understood it, it gave a sense of inclusion for visually impaired people to be able to applaud the audio describer with the rest of the audience. And it's a small thing to do, but it adds to the sense of occasion for everybody who's been there. It was a special performance. And it's also something which is a way of judging, of the describer getting feedback and the describees feeding back to the describer. Without that, what did you think of my performance issue that Ruth was talking about?
Jane has had a hand up for a while.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now,
Oh,
Jane. Amazing.
Thank goodness, that was a struggle, I can tell you. And just looping back a little bit on this one, to when Ruth said, and Edward mentioned too, that nobody wants to go and say, was I any good? But sometimes I've found I've been able, in the right sort of theatre, to catch up with the clients, the customers at the interval. If I can nail where they are, or the audience is small enough, and then I'll say, did you get the signal okay? And was everything all right for you? And I haven't asked them how I've done, but I hope from the sort of response I get that I'm going to get an idea. It is embarrassing otherwise, I agree.
Yeah.
Don't forget though, can I just say something? Don't forget that it's a kind of a how can I put this? It's kind of like an unequal relationship, because 9 times out of 10, the blind or partially blind person won't recognize the audio describer, won't be able to find them or see them, so won't be able to find them independently and tell them what they think. So if you don't come to us, we're not going to find you. Do you see what I mean? We're not. It's very hard for us to find you because we can't see you, whereas we're very visible with our white canes and our headsets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So if people aren't coming to talk to you, it doesn't mean that they don't want to. It probably just means they don't know where you are.
Yeah, I think that's very valid.
So you could, I mean, what you could do is at the touch toy, you could say, I'll be in the bar afterwards. No pressure. I mean, just like, if just say, I'll be, if you want to, I'll be around afterwards. Come find me if you want to.
So we'll take a comment or a question from Mo, and then we'll go on to the next.
Then we'll move on.
section. Yeah. So Mo.
Well, I was going to raise the point that Jane did about using the interval, because you need to check in any case that the technical side is all working, and it is a really good opportunity to let them know that you're open to feedback. It's also a highlighter of the blessing of having a second describer, because you can stay at your post while your colleague goes down and tentatively probes whether your AD was any good or not. But if you have a little script ready to say to people, it can really open them up, because I basically say that I'm looking for ways of improving my service to them. And so any feedback on anything that could have been done better is also welcome. And I say that. And I think the interval is also an important opportunity, because many of the patrons I've met have some urgent transport to catch at the end of the show. They can't be dilly-dallying around while you get your expensive laptop out of the the room before you go and meet them, and so on and so forth. So you want to grab them while it's possible to do so. So from a practical point of view, the interval is good, but that's always balanced against their need for a toilet break and a sort of relaxation. So it's just kind of feeling your way, really. What I find very useful is to tell people that I'm collecting their verbal feedback and that I'm recording snippets of their comments on the phone, because that is much quicker than you trying to make notes, or and also it kind of gets them ready. They get an idea. Oh, right, so they want a quick sort of soundbite or a sentence or two. And it doesn't do any harm to mention that audio description is encouraged for the venue to use it if the venue gets feedback that people are actually using it. You know, blind people and partially blind people know, you know, that we live in a sort of world of finance and marketing, and people need to know that the service is being used. They completely get that, so you can use that as well.
Great.
I find that they'll often tell the ushers. If you've had ushers on the touch tool, people will often tell the ushers if there are any issues in a very transparent way.
Great. Shall we go on to the next section, Hannah?
Yeah. So as part of the project, we were thinking about ways of getting theatres more involved, and trying to encourage theatres to give audio describers more access. So access to creatives. So we just made a tiny little video, which I'm hopefully gonna play for you in a tiny little minute. It's doing it's thinking about it. There we go.
Hi there, I'm Michael Skellen. I'm an audio describer for Vocalize and an actor. I'm going to describe myself now to make this video accessible to everyone. I'm early 30s with olive skin and black hair worn in a neat part, and I'm wearing a blue button-down shirt. This is what we do for your play, live. Audio description means capturing the visual language of your play in words. In recorded audio introductions, we describe the set, costume, and characters. And just before the show, we bring the audience on stage to get a tactile sense of those elements in touch tours. Then, during the play, we are live backstage with a microphone, using spaces between the dialogue to squeeze in essential information for the blind audience to follow and enjoy. To offer an amazing and inclusive experience in your theatre and to do your play justice, we need your help. We want to get across all the layers of visual detail that you've carefully created. So while we describe the appearance of the set, props and characters, we also describe facial expressions, gestures, and spatial relationships. We describe meaningful looks, the tempo of a fight, and deliver the visual gags. We want to get across all the colour and subtlety that makes your production unique, so that everyone in the audience can be wowed by the work that you've done. So we ask for just 30 minutes with a member of the creative team to talk to us about the visual world of your play. This could be the assistant director, the movement director, or designer, and a phone call or a Zoom is more than enough. Tell us about the themes you've explored, character choices you've made, and technical feats you've achieved so that we can better focus the lens of our audio description and make it the best it can be. We also encourage you to join the actors at the Touch Tour and listen to the AD. It's a very useful way to see how your vision is being communicated. Thank you for your help in making audio description the best inclusive experience possible. And remember, half an hour of your time will make all the difference.
There you go. So let me see, how do I get back to my PowerPoint now? Would it just be the clicking there? Oh yes, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that video was kind of made to try and get theatres to let audio describers in a little bit earlier than has been the case. And really the project was about trying to think about embedding audio description in a theatre's processes right from the beginning. So what we did was we ran some workshops. So on the screen, I'm just showing some images from some workshops we ran with casts and creatives and describers. These ones on the screen are from the Globe. And we kind of explained what audio description was to the actors and got them to describe themselves and each other and their kind of onstage relationships. And they found it incredibly enriching. And we tried to kind of spin it as a kind of rehearsal, you know, that it wasn't, they weren't doing a service for us. They were working on their characterization in a way by verbalizing it. We also obviously we went after the so yeah, we had users at the workshops, and the workshops took place a couple of weeks before each production, and then we went back for the production, and you can see on this pictures of me and Rachel at the touch tour and with our headsets waiting for the production to start, and we also organized post-show discussions with casts and creatives and users, and we produced some leaflets. So there's a kind of it's a two-sided A5 leaflet, which basically on one side it explains what audio description is, and on the other it gives a bit of information about the project. And we distributed them throughout the auditorium. And this is a really nice image of a family at the Globe for, I think it was 12th night. And they've kind of come in and they've picked up, and we're just sitting behind them. They've come in and they've picked up the leaflet and they're discussing it. And those are three, you know, people who'd never heard of audio description who now know what it is and might think about it. We also had a very lovely picture of myself, Matthew Cock and Rachel Hutchinson, and we had a big poster, still got a big poster in fact, which we displayed at all our productions. So it was a way we really wanted to raise awareness of audio description from the beginning, you know, all the way through the production. And we actually managed to get the theatres to send out, you know, theatres always send out emails before events, especially at the moment with all the kind of COVID instructions and how to find us, blah, 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 you know, how to book drinks, etc., etc. In that email, we got them to put a link to the audio introduction so that every audience member could listen to it in advance. So it's not just an access thing, it's part of the play, if you like. And we also told the whole audience about the audio description and about the post-show Q&A. To be honest, this is a copy of an email that the Donmar sent out. Of our 12 productions, this is the only one that got sent out without a problem. And it's the last one we did. So it took about a year for us to work out how to talk to theatres in such a way that they would manage to send this email out, because it turns out it's incredibly complicated working with theatres, because you've got to talk to their comms people and their marketing people and their box office, and their access people don't talk to their comms people, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. So that was a huge part of our struggle. Okay, so these are the recommendations, some of the recommendations that came out of our of the project. So make sure that everyone in the theatre that an AD user might encounter knows what AD is and can understand it, appreciate it, and help to the person to access it. So there's no point having an audio described performance if the people working in the bar can't audio describe the menu to the person wanting to buy a drink. Okay, there's no good having an audio described performance if the people in the shop don't know, you know, how to tell people what's in the shop. Okay, I'm not talking, I mean, you guys know this is what we were trying to get across to theatres. Involve actors in the AD process, give the describers access to the creative team. That's why we made the video, so they can talk about the visual language. Name, as we've already mentioned this, name the describers on the website, in the marketing, front of house. And then finally, tell everyone about the AD performance. I mean, I'm astonished that theatres don't use this as a kind of massive marketing opportunity, given what someone just said about the importance of finance, which we all understand, and audio description is very expensive, as we found out in the project. Why aren't theatres like shouting it from the rooftops that they're providing this on this particular day? You know. Anyway, you guys all know this, but I was what I'd like from you is how thoughts about how we can kind of make this happen in theatres, because it happened a little bit during the project, but because we had quite a lot of money to throw, money and time, and in normal circumstances we wouldn't have that. So voila.
Yeah, we have a question from or a comment from Dan.
Hi Dan.
Hi Hannah, hello everyone. I just wanted to share a little bit about, I suppose, a little bit about our process, because it relates to a lot of what you've just spoke about in regards to working with the theatre and with the creatives, which I'm hope will be useful for everyone. Just in regards to getting access to the creative team, as actors, we kind of knew from the start what the kind of best days were in regards to when everyone is in the room at the same time. And I would really recommend any audio describers that were trying to get access to the creative team is pushed to be in the room on the first day of rehearsal. And the reason that is because that day you hear a read through, so you have all the actors there doing the read through, but you also have the designer in the room. You'd usually have pretty much every member of the creative team, costume. They'll be talking through a model box of the set, so you'll see a mini version of the set. The designer will take you through what's sort of inspired them to create it in that way, and their thoughts. And you can just be sat there in the room with a notepad, just scribbling down things that they say and things that costume will say. But it's basically an opportunity to meet everyone. You can also use that time to sort of grab email addresses for designers, directors, things like that. But you also get to hear the play read aloud, ages before you'd see a run through of it. And it's an opportunity, maybe you can grab actors and things like that. So I would just recommend, like, that's part of what our process, and we're quite lucky, I suppose, in regards to the theatre we're doing most of our work from at the moment in Sheffield, and they are allowing us to have that access and to sort of request time with the actors and all sorts. And I know it might not be the same with every theatre, so we're quite lucky in that respect. But I just wanted to say that day would definitely be the day to try and get access to the creative team, and would be the most useful day for you to be in the room. And you'd get, I think, as an audio describer, you'd get the most from that day out for what you'd need to do that. So just wanted to share that, really. And I hope that's helpful.
Just a comment. Yeah, Joe, you can go on. Yeah.
Can I just, because I share the same experience as Dan. I would absolutely agree. It's so important. I think what I learned, because we're very new, and what I learned about is the very first rule is to make sure that everybody knows what it is, because we have been allowed access, and I do think that first day is very important. So we are visible to the creative team and what we do, and also if the writer's there, because we're writing, like, we are translators. But I would also want to share some of the frustrations and challenges in that has been, I think everybody, I haven't met any negative, energies in it. Everybody's like, every designer I've spoken to, every actor is very, very enthusiastic and on board with us. But for me, the challenge is continuing that conversation. So it's so celebrated on the first day, and then of course, and being actors as well, we know once you get into rehearsals, it gets so insular and isolating. You get into your head, you are digging in the script and all of that, and then the AD can become, maintaining that conversation can become difficult, because then everybody gets very much into their own process, and you've only got 3 weeks, and it's time, and things change. So what we've started writing and the things that we've picked up from day one have changed so much by the time we get to the first run in the space or whatever else, that but we haven't been looped in conversations. You have to keep going, hello, is anything happening? Is it props changing? Or if you're going to be involved from day one, I think you have to be involved for the whole thing, and maybe like weekly check-ins or things like that, because as we've found, we watched just in our latest experience with Anna Karenina, we watched a preview, and because time is of the essence and things a lot of the time directors use previews to change things. So as much as we were there from the beginning, things changed massively. So that when we saw press night, costumes had changed, lighting had changed. So it's kind of like managing the work that we do, how integrated we are, and how much of the work that we have done then has to be put in the bin. And we have to, well, this framework's great, but we have to kind of then go into our rewrites, or why has that, if we're going to say this is why the director made the decision, this is why the designer designed it like that, we then have to go, oh, they changed it because. So it is kind of, that's what we're on the journey of, going, are we artists within it as well, and on that journey. I've just rambled on loads.
No, that makes a lot of sense actually, because one of the comments we kept getting from theatres is there's no point in the audio describers coming in before press night, because press night is when it's locked. So if they come in before then, it's just a waste of their time because things will change. So yeah, I totally hear you about the balance of getting access, but also not wasting audio describer time. And but I think every single actor I met said, oh my God, this is so interesting. It's a shame we didn't know about it earlier. So I think, raising awareness with actors so that when an actor gets a contract for a piece, they go, when's the audio described performance? Who's the describer? How can I help?
Yeah.
It would be, amazing.
The one thing I wanted to comment on, which has made me think, is that I think it's perhaps a little bit easier for a theatre where a play or a production's been done in-house. There's a lot of theatres out there that basically take in touring shows, and there's a lot of describers out there who basically work continuously on touring shows, where you've got a show coming in week by week. I think it's a lot harder for them in order to get the sort of creative input from the producers, because the show's in existence, it's going all around the country. And that's what flagged up for me, is how do you try to make sure that you get that sort of contact and the information that you need in that situation? Because I can imagine, I'm doing some work with Hampstead Theatre at the moment, where I'm sort of creating special audio accompaniments for their studio shows, which are like 100 people, in order to try to make it a bit more inclusive and a bit more accessible. And they are giving me a lot more help at the creative level in order for me to do that. But it's because everything is produced in-house. Everything's done in-house, where I think for those who are at theatres where you've basically got a different show in every week or every 2 weeks, it's going to be a lot harder for them in order to connect with the producers and, to see, because they would have to then perhaps go into the creative process even before they had been commissioned to actually do that job, and that's not going to be viable in order for them to do that. So I think it's trying to think about that, and how there can be a connection in some way, between a describer and the producer, to get that information. And quite a lot of the time, there are producers out there of these sort of shows, like sort of Bill Kenwright, and who are not very helpful at all, and are a bit of a nightmare really to communicate with. We've got a question from Edwards, or a comment?
Yes, different direction, but on what you were talking about, Hannah. you talked about the Donmar managing to include a link to the pre-show notes. Did you get any data back on click-through? How many
No,
people used it?
that is, I'll ask Matthew at Vocalize, because it's on the Vocalize website. So I'll ask him. That's a really good point. It was only a couple of weeks ago, actually. But yeah, I would. I mean, yeah, I will find that out. Thank you. I'm going to write that down.
It's very hard to get any metrics on any of this.
Yeah.
And that's one place where you could.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And then, sorry, just to join back to the previous conversation, I may be in a minority. I usually am, in fact. My feeling about the describer getting engaged in the creative process that leads to the play being ready is, when I go to the theatre, I go with somebody, and if they're describing it for me, I see it through their eyes. But I don't want to see it through the eyes of the director, as well. You know, I don't want the creative team's intention to be conveyed to me. I want to see what they actually created, not what they were trying to create. And I want to see it just in the eyes of the describer. So, you know, if I go to see something that's described by Ros, I won't expect her to describe it in the same way as if Mo's doing it. And I somehow feel that there's something within this which is saying that let's get to the absolute bottom line of what it is that the production is trying to say by sitting there throughout the process. And that doesn't help me enjoy the production.
Yeah, and I totally see that, and I actually agree with you. I think a describer's never going to be describing the ideal director's vision at all, and that would be completely not a representation of the play. So I think it's useful to have the describers engage so that they can kind of have privileged information, but not necessarily use it in a way which is relevant to the day on which they're seeing the show. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I like description best when it's, you know, when it tells you why everyone's laughing at something that went wrong.
It's the difference between giving the blind audience the same experience and giving an equivalent experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about getting me to laugh at the same time as everybody else rather than 30 seconds later.
Yeah.
That's the skill of the describer. Not. I mean, that's more important actually than knowing what colour the set is.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. Just to jump in on this question of receiving houses and touring productions, what if the audio description script travelled with the production rather than being created every week at a different theatre?
I was just going to say the same thing on Tim's point, was that there must be a time when it's rehearsed, the show's rehearsed, and there must be an initial describer for the first showing of it. And is there any way of then connecting the describers across the country or across the world as it's passed on? And
can I ask Jonathan to join in this conversation? Because I'm curious in regard to the cost and the like, and the almost the ownership of who's actually written the description for one of these productions. But because I know that sometimes you'll have a describer who has written the description for a show, and then they will sell it for a cost to another describer so they don't have to write it. I'm wondering that if you, Jonathan, can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose I do work in a lot of touring venues. So I personally don't worry about having ownership of the script. I've written the script because I've been asked to for a specific venue. I'm always happy to share it, and I do share it. I will let other people have my notes. So I agree with Dan. I think that the commissioning theatre, this is what we need to get in. Whoever commissions it first and foremost is the one that should have that opportunity to go to the rehearsals. They're the ones that are going to really get under the skin of that production, and then we can pass that on. I also liked what Edward was saying. I totally agree. We can't get directors' visions, because sometimes I've had a director saying, well, you are describing this in a certain way, and we're thinking, well, no, that doesn't come across. I'm sorry, I can't describe what you would like to have achieved when you actually haven't achieved it. So I think that's important as well. The problem with script sharing is we type our description, we interleaf it with the actual written dialogue. Now that is copyright and we do not own it. And that has been the lifelong problem with audio description, is that it's very difficult to share a script with AD in it. We could share the AD, but they'd have to then separately put that back in to the script, because technically we shouldn't, for copyright reasons, be sharing the actual script. The bottom line will be is when producers book an audio describer for the whole tour, and the describer is part of the company and you go with the show. That will solve all of those issues.
Jane has a comment and then Andrew. So we'll quickly go over to Jane.
Right. I completely agree about the script sharing and with Jonathan, and I will script share where I can, because I don't think it helps anybody to reinvent the wheel. And I also don't think it necessarily means you don't have to think about the script that you borrowed from somebody else. A, because everybody thinks differently, and I've never yet had a script I didn't have to adjust. And B, because it helps you to take the thing forward a little further. Somebody else has done the foothills of the work, you can take it a little further. So I don't think it's in any way a work avoidance thing. What worries me is, and I hope this goes away largely because of Hannah's work and Rachel's work, what worries me is the theatre who thinks, oh, I've got a free audio description script here. We don't have any describers, but I know, the FOH person, the FOH manager is keen on amateur dramatics. They can do the reading of the audio description. I can see that happening and it worries me.
Yeah, I can see that happening as well, Jane. A question or a comment from Andrew?
Hello, everyone. Yes, sorry, I was late to the meeting, so I didn't introduce myself. I'm Andrew Piper. I'm one of the vocalized describers. Yes, no, I mean, really, it was about the kind of just really to echo Edward's point, that I think there's only so much that benefit to us kind of having that extra theatrical knowledge, or the knowledge of the process that went into the play. I mean, certainly we want to be able to get under the skin of it, and some plays that's a bit more challenging than others. But there is also an element of, well, we're only paid a certain amount, and if we've got to add extra days onto that, we've got the first view, we've got the dry run, we've got to write the notes, we've got to record the notes, we've got to, and do all that. And if we're within, if by spending a whole day going to the run through and talking to the director and seeing the model box and all that sort of thing, we can take something out of what we're already doing, that's brilliant. But I don't quite see how that would do that. I mean, if it's being commissioned in a different way, and the fee structure is different or whatever, brilliant. But I think we are fundamentally about being, seeing the play as someone seeing it for the first time might see it.
Because can I quickly, we'll go to Jane in a minute, but can I quickly ask Dan and Joe, because it's raised a question for me from what Andrew said. How does all of your creative input in rehearsals and sort of going into the run through at the beginning, how does that actually impact on the financial aspect of what you actually get paid for the actual job? Are you actually getting paid for that full day, or is that like almost incorporated into the full cost of what you actually get?
Well, at the moment, we charge a flat rate for all the time. We get expenses. So I suppose because we're a young company and we're only sort of, I don't know, I'm just guesstimating probably like 6-7 descriptions in as a company, as 4 of us. So that's not even individually. We also didn't want to we pitched, I suppose. I think over time we'll start asking for more money, but we pitched it as a week's work as an actor, which is equity minimum, which is I think £465, and that's because we sort of had a look at what we do and the time that we spend there, and we sort of judged that to be, you know, a week's work in total. But I think we found, because we do add a creative element to it, and we try and deliver as a sort of unnamed character, and it sort of adds more layers to the description than which is kind of more work and more head work as well. I think we've all come to a conclusion as a company that we should probably be getting paid a bit more for it. But at the same time, we feel very lucky and happy to be working, you know, at Sheffield and sort of doing their main house shows and having a block of work to experiment and to grow and to learn. So at the same time, feel quite happy to be sort of being looked after there and sort of being grown. But I think we do also sort of have come to the conclusion, like I said, that it's a bit more work and a bit more sort of mentally tiring than we'd initially thought.
Sort of quickly get a comment from Joe.
I think that the point is that when that we're experimenting with where it can go, because I don't know, some of you might know our story, some of you might not. It's what's interesting about what Hannah's saying about including the actors in the process is we are actors first and foremost, but we were lucky enough to be in a production that had constant integrated audio description. So we learned to be traditional audio describers. And then we described in character, not as ourselves. So we were like, what is the possibility here? So as far as like the director's vision and all of that it's a work in progress. And I don't think we can go, this works, this doesn't. I think what we're trying to do is just explore. And what we're finding difficult, I think for me anyway, at the minute, is that because we're not involved as actors and on stage and visible like we were when we had our idealistic, you know, this is brilliant, this should happen in every single performance of it, this shouldn't, is that we're not doing that. So how do we try and deliver what we're trying to deliver in a more from an actor's perspective, when we're actually only given access as a traditional audio describer? So I totally get that we have to describe what we see, and we understand what that is, but I think we're trying to go, what can it be? Can it be anything else? And I just think that, I know this might sound really idealistic, but that's where we came from. And now we're understanding the challenges of that, which you probably have all known for years, but we're coming at it from not an actor's point of view initially. And then I suppose listening to this conversation is so interesting. Then in my head, I'm going, well, are we then a theatre company? Are we writers? Do we have to go from the very start to make this thing that we have experienced, but we want to? Is it new plays? Is it, you know, we can't do it with touring productions. We have to do it with in-house productions, but we're being supported in-house, but we're not being supported as actor describers. We're being supported as describers who can I don't know, we're trained to do more things with our voices, and we are being creative, but we're not doing exactly what we want to do. Does that make sense? So I think we're trying to almost write another character in the play for most of the plays, because we're not in from the writing stage. The only other way I can think of how you would do it differently in, say, this, it's because we're doing Anna Karenina. So I think the director's vision was important for me to understand, because it's so not naturalistic. I had to understand what was going on. And also the director was saying that I want there to be a surprise in this play. There's a figure that's a surprise. So the director had ownership of it and went, I don't want you to describe that part of the play. That's a surprise. So we had that information, whereas we would have just put that in introductory notes that were available on the website. We have to keep that as a surprise because that's his vision. It is his show. So the only other way to do it is if we were to train the actors to do what our dream is themselves. Have I gone on too much?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
What we're experimenting is that we're experimenting. We don't know where it's going to go, but yeah, that's just where I'm coming from. I think with the director's vision and being part of rehearsals, maybe it's coming too much from an actor's point of view.
Excellent. I think Jane had a very quick comment. If we can have a quick one.
I did, yes, I take the hint, it will be quick. Just following from Andrew Piper's comment earlier, I think I was one of the lucky people who actually got contact via a 20-minute Zoom, the contact that Hannah and Rachel had been fighting for at the Donmar. We spoke to the assistant director of the show we were going to describe. Now, I can't say for sure that it revolutionized my description. It didn't. It added one insight that I hadn't got before. So perhaps I was doing my job okay-ish. But I can say that when Roz said to me later that every time I hear from somebody else in a team in a theatre, I feel I can do a better job and I'm more involved. I really relate to that. You're opening up the chance of being a better describer through that. And also this assistant director who agreed to talk to us on the Zoom, she'd never heard of audio description. She hadn't heard of it when the Zoom started. She hadn't looked it up. And she's right there at the heart of it, and that she won't be the only one. So I think actually the contacts with the theatres will work both ways, and it will do a lot to promote audio description and hopefully oil the wheels in a way that may not help us individual describers at the time, but will go to a wider context.
Right, I'm a bit concerned on the time because we're kind of coming up close to the end of the session, but is there anything specifically, Hannah, that you want to touch upon in maybe the next 5 or 10 minutes?
I'm just going to tell everyone about what the outputs were. So I've already mentioned the Inclusive AD Forum, which it's a kind of safe space, a discussion forum hosted on Basecamp, which is quite easy to use. A lot of you are already members, and we have little discussions. There's lots of resources. People ask questions and share comments and things. And you've all got my email address because I was copied in to the reminder about today's meeting, so I can add you. All I need from you is your email address and your first and last name, and I can add you to that. We've made 2 videos. So there's a tiny little one that I showed you. There's a much longer one, which is basically everything that theatres need to know about audio description. And in an ideal world, actors and theatres would all watch it if they were involved in audio description. And they're both on the on YouTube, and you've got the links in that document that Tim shared. And then there's this famous 4-week inclusive online course that I know some of you have done and some of you have contributed to. I think this is potentially my favorite output because it's gonna be online forever. There's like 20 little videos, there's 20 articles, there's activities, there's comments, there's discussion forums, and we've had some really nice feedback. About 1,000 people have taken it so far. So again, the link's on the bit of paper, and I think that is, oh yeah, and thank you to our partners, including the wonderful Vocalize, Mind's Eye, lots of amazing people have been part of our project, and I'm always happy to talk about it with you. So that's it from me. I'll stop sharing, and then if anyone's got any more comments or questions.
Yeah, so if anyone has any comments or questions before we finish up, I will mention that it's probably you know good if we all kind of become ambassadors on this, and that if we can share this information with theatres and with producers, and you know, because I think the more we actually spread awareness of what's available and what's out there, that is more likely to bring about change. You know, so if you're working with a theatre and they don't know what audio description is and they don't know the process, you know, there's a whole resource of information, as Hannah said, that is available to share, and we can because I actually feel in the field that we're in, part of our job is almost educating about audio description and raising awareness, you know, because we're always going to make people in the industry and theatres who don't know much about it, who need to know about it in order to provide a service in the first place. Because if they don't know about it, they're not going to be able to do the job they're supposed to be doing. It's amazing how many people who are given access jobs in theatres who don't really know anything about access or anything about audio description. And I've spent so much time having conversations where you've got to almost educate them what a touch tour is and how you can do a touch tour and all these different things, and they don't know anything because they've been plucked out of a box office job and automatically just given this access, you know, position, and they've got to be educated, you know. So I think we can all help in that because we can become ambassadors, and if we see someone who needs to know more, then we can help them with that and we can provide that information.
Can I just say good luck to Joe and Dan. I think you're doing a good job. You're doing your best. You're finding out lots of things, and we'll be really interested to know how it goes.
Yeah, and we'll have we'll maybe do another session in the future around the creative process and AD, and almost this experimentation that you were talking about, you know, in relation to your kind of, you're almost experimenting in a way to find out what can be done and what can be achieved. And also I'd be very interested to get feedback of like how people are finding this form of audio description in relation to the traditional, and like if some people prefer it or some people would rather have, or some people perhaps like a combination of the both of them. You know, it would be interesting to actually hear more from the community. It would be good actually to maybe do a focus group or a session where there's like a group of audio described people or a large group of people are actually invited to this almost as a research project, really, to actually find out what people want within the community, and if people want a little bit more, if they actually want this immersive experience or not. It would be interesting to get more feedback on that. Any more comments before we go?
Like to do. Oh.
Mo?
I think what people want is choice.
Yeah.
And not to show up at a theatre expecting their favourite describer or their trad AD and finding it's an experimental thing, which might be wonderful, but they might not get on with it, or vice versa, that they've hear the picture and then they turn up and the next one is nothing like that. But what hopefully can happen in the future is that you'll be able to choose. And I've just delivered a script for a multi-channel audio description where people will attend one show and be able to select the type of audio description they want. So it's been multiply described, the same event.
That's amazing. That sounds amazing. What event is it?
I'll let you know in the future.
Okay.
Because it's in experimentation, and research and development.
That sounds amazing.
I know Sonali Ray talked about this years ago at ADA in London, the Audio Description Association of UK, in a London meeting. So hopefully there'll be all the flavours of ice cream, folks.
You know, I think we do need to think towards the future and like what can be achieved, and with technology and with you know, there is that innovation out there, and I think that if you can get all the partners on board, then it can happen. And there is always issues. I think everybody knows here there's always restraints around financial resources, and that's, you know, there's always lots of obstacles around that have got to be overcome in order to make things happen. But I think as long as we're talking about it, and as long as we push for it, and as long as we get the right people together in a room or on a Zoom session who can try to make those things happen, then we have a chance for all these dreams and visions and, you know, to come to some sort of reality. Andrew, did you have a quick comment?
Yeah, only just to say that, so I would always consider myself to be aiming for an immersive experience. I wouldn't necessarily be introducing lots of kind of additional material that wasn't visual. The second thing is really, I don't know that choices, you know, I don't go to a theatre where Rory Kinnear is playing Hamlet and go, actually, I'd like to see Benedict Cumberbatch tonight. So it's as long as you know what you're getting. I think Mo is quite right to say that people should have an idea of what they're getting when they turn up. I think it's a bit unlikely that we'll end up with dual channel, what kind of audio description would you like? Because I think actually a fashion will or a consensus will be reached about what people generally prefer, and that one will dominate.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting about choice. That I think because going to it depends if you go to the theatre a lot, you don't like all of the plays. It's about like being able to be individual within it and kind of like, yeah, you're not going to like everything. So I suppose then it is about going which audio describer best suits this production. So that has been thought about. In this case, it's a really new production. So I think it's just important to be the community that we're offering this service to are individuals and have their own tastes as well. And it's like, that's really important. It's just that information gets out as well. So yeah, there's room for loads of improvement in every area, I think. That's just what I think.
Yeah, because it's availability and communication as well, isn't it? It's getting, when an audio described performance is scheduled, it's getting that information out. Like, there are so many people who want to go to an audio described performance, but they can't actually go because it's available a lot of the time on one date at one time, and that is the only time you can go and experience that. And there are a lot of people who say to me, I would have gone to that, but I had something else on that day, I couldn't go. And there is, in a way, that does take away some of the inclusivity. It does sort of, that is a problem we've got to overcome. And then that sort of brings you into so many other discussion points, like pre-recorded audio description. And there's a lot of problems with that sort of, that technology still, you know, and a lot of people actually still do want live audio description. You know, they don't want, but then there are some theatres who make it available 2 or 3 times, but the resources of that is a lot more expensive, you know, and how do you pay for that, and how do you sustain that? And then it's getting people there. Like, I know that you can bring 40 people to an audio described performance when it's marketed early on and there's a lot of demand for it. You will get people who will come out. But I think it was interesting what Joe said, and I think what Mo said as well about having this choice. I think you need a lot of people to hear the different forms of audio description in order to make that choice, because then if a lot of people heard, say, a traditional AD and hear the picture AD, they would be able to make that choice what they preferred and then ask the theatre for it and sort of basically say, oh, well, I prefer the more immersive one. And then perhaps going back to what Andrew said, that would become what people wanted, because people would start asking for it and say, well, I preferred this form of audio description, and that would become the one that would replace everything else. And yeah, the innovation, the technology aside, I kind of also agree that I can't quite see you having a headset or an app with 3 channels of audio description. I think for pre-records, yes, and for maybe on a DVD or online or whatever, you can have 3 tracks and you can select the track that you wanted. I can see us going down that in the future, but yeah. Andrew, you got a comment?
Yes, I mean, I think you're quite right. What we need is a constant consultation, an ongoing consultation with audio description users about what works for them, what they like, what they don't like, and that,
yeah, the feedback from them is so important.
I think
it shapes the future of audio description.
This is a comment for Vocalize, really, but I think Vocalize ought to be sending questionnaires to every single person who attends an audio described performance, and go and with a feedback. What did you like? What did you not like? So the other point I was going to make was just in terms of, so one of the confounding variables, as it were, is that even if you say, oh, this is a traditional AD, within that model, there are people creating immersive, engaging, thoughtful, intelligent, witty scripts, and there are people who are doing much more prosaic, no names, no pack draw, but potentially even quite dull stuff that audio describe that audience members don't enjoy as much. So there is a wide variation even within the traditional model of how a show is described. I mean, even a choice. So a show that Diane and I were working on recently, until I had to drop out because of bloody COVID, was Cyrano. Now that had already been described, but then when it came to it, Diane and I wanted to do to approach it in a much more sparse way and let language do more of the work. That was still within the same, technically the same model, but it would have been a very different experience from the person who came to the first script versus the second script.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that, Andrew, and I think that doesn't sound dissimilar to what, like, I think you've approached it really creatively and intelligently and kind of gone, what does this need? That's not far from really what we're being allowed to do at the minute. But I think just it is really great listening to this conversation for us being really, learning and trying to experiment. It just feels a bit like, also with technology moving on, like, what is theatre too? Like, it feels like we need the community that we are serving to. I totally agree with the feedback forms. It's almost like, and as an actor, I love the Q&As, because that's when it becomes more in depth. It's like on press night when there's a big celebration and the play's like, that's what it's going to be for the next 3 weeks, and then everybody disperses, and if they're able to go to the pub for a debrief. It's almost like the community and social aspect of it doesn't have to be, you want it to not be so structured. It's almost like, who are these people? Can we talk, why are they going to the theatre? Because you want an in-person experience. Anybody can watch a film, and hopefully most of them are audio described, but it's like creating that sighted and non-sighted audiences going, this is a great experience, and the night will kind of go on, and we can have a Q&A that's like once a week or as the play changes, because it depends where that Q&A happens in the show for actors as well. I think I'm getting carried away now, but I think it's what theatre can be in a world where people have not been to the theatre for 2 years and are a bit cautious about going, what is safe and what is exciting about that experience of that community.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting what you say. I went with a friend to the your audio description for talent at the Crucible, and he said to me, I wish everybody in the auditorium could have heard that audio description, because he wasn't partially sighted, but he was listening from, an interest point of view to find out a lot more about it. But he said it enhanced the theatre production, because it was almost an enhancement of the show that was actually going on stage. And that raised a lot of questions for me quickly, because we are going to have to finish soon. But another thing I'd like to comment on is that what will be quite interesting, I think, Joe and Dan, from your point of view, is that sort of going forward into sort of development, what I would suggest is I would kind of suggest you to try to get a large group of visually impaired people there by perhaps working with the local site association, and perhaps maybe just try to get some funding, to get them a free ticket or whatever, and get them to experience your sort of audio description, and then have like a coffee session afterwards with a Q&A, and where you can have a discussion, because then that will almost determine where you go with this, and where, because that will give you that important development and feedback. And then you'll get people who say, oh, I love that, or I hate that. And then that will help you to determine where you're going, I think, in the future with this. And I think that's an important aspect. But sometimes people need a nudge into a theatre. They need an incentive. They need something to get them there. And I actually feel that you really need that feedback from sort of at least, a larger group, because you're going to get completely different perspectives from that group.
Yeah.
Any quick comments? Because we have gone over 15 minutes, so we're going to have to finish soon. But obviously, you have my email if you have any questions. I'll also resend, because of the BCC thing, I'll resend Hannah's email for anyone who doesn't have it. And you can ask Hannah any questions. And we will revisit this in the future, because it is we could have talked about it for like an extra hour and a half. It's raised so many questions. And also, I think it does involve people coming together, to try to find solutions, because there's so many obstacles around this sort of area of how do we make theatre more inclusive for people. So any more final comments? If there isn't, we'll end the session. But a big thank you to Hannah for being with us today and for giving up her time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for listening. And I mean, I hope you understood that the project couldn't have happened without describers, and not just the people in the room who were part of it, but all of you guys. So yeah, I'm really appreciative of the work that everyone does. So thank you as well.
So thank you to everyone for being here. I will send out a link with this session, which will be on YouTube, and also information of future sort of discussions in the next few weeks or so. Cheers. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. That was longer than I thought.